So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Activity and Robert Half Collaboration Forum. This is week 9 of our series, and it's great to be back with you all once again. My name's Paul Middleton. I'm a Managing Director in Protiviti, and I'm joined here today by my colleagues from Protiviti and by my colleagues from our sister company, Robert Half. I'm also pleased to introduce my co-host for today from Protiviti, Peter Richardson. Since January, we've been bringing you this series of debates on a range of topics to invigorate, challenge, and inspire us all during these times, and are designed to bring us optimism. And today we're shifting our focus towards the future of work and what that future might hold for us all. For those of you new to our forums, we started these a year ago with the intention of creating a regular forum for business leaders where, in the face of the challenges, the disruptions, and the uncertainties we all faced, you could talk to each other, learn from each other, challenge each other, and gain confidence from each other's perspectives. Almost a year has passed, and our mission remains the same. But the challenges, the disruption, the uncertainty certainly remains, and are arguably even greater. With an unlock date seeming still so far away, uncertainty over vaccines, the effects of Brexit, global political turmoil, it's easy to lose perspective. So in this, our 4th series, we want to bring you renewed perspectives, some fresh insights, and a healthy dose of optimism and confidence, as we believe that within the adversity that we all see, with collaboration and the right mindset, lies opportunity for us all. But this opportunity is different from before, and different in a number of ways. The opportunity that we might see will present itself differently. Our clients and stakeholder expectations are likely to be different. The timeframes are likely to be different. The way we and our own people react to that opportunity will be different. And the solutions that we present will need to be different. So what does that mean for us today? It means that we need to be ready to work together differently, and that our old office norms and our old working habits may no longer be so relevant when we're unlocked and when we're released back into our old world. So we'd like to begin to explore this future of work theme today. And actually, we're going to do so again next week, and also as well in our next series, which will be starting in late April. And to help us explore that theme today, I'm delighted to say that we're joined by the CEO of UK parcel courier and delivery company Yodel, Mike Hancox. Mike joined Yodel in September 2019 as an experienced CEO with a track record of delivering successful business transformation across companies such as Littlewood Shop Direct, Otto UK, Ideal Shopping Direct, and he also acted as a non-executive director of delivery software company Sorted, as well as non-executive chairman at retail services company Sigma. He's also chairman of global marketplace platform Frugo. And in all those enterprises, Mike has driven a bold change agenda. And particularly in Yodel, he's been doing this since September 2019 to turn around its fortunes, as well as to position it for a post-pandemic future. And he'll be telling us more about that shortly. He'll also be sharing perspectives and lessons that he's learned from this that are relevant to your world and will hopefully inspire you all, and that you can react to those perspectives. As ever, reacting is what we want you to do. We want you to let us know your thoughts and questions. To do that, you can raise your hand using the Teams button in the right-hand corner, and we'll come to you, or you can write your thoughts in the chat. Or if you just can't contain yourself and you're bursting with energy this time in the morning, you can take yourself off mute and let us hear what you have to say. But please do react and get involved, as it's infectious. As I mentioned earlier, I'm joined today by my colleague from Protiviti, Peter Richardson. Peter's leading our global initiative across Protiviti, helping us and our clients reimagine the future of work and the future of the office. Peter will speak more to that later. But Mike, if I may, I'd like to start by asking you if you can tell us about your journey as CEO of Yodel and how the company and brand has evolved under your leadership, please.
Yeah, good morning, Paul. Thanks for the introduction. Good morning, everybody. It's my first time on this forum, so it's great to be here. As Paul said, I joined Yodel in 2019, and it's not the first time I've been there. I've been a CEO now for around 20 years. Before that, I was a CFO. And back in the early 2000s, I was CFO at GUS Home Shopping and was really part of the team that sold that business to the Barclay family in 2003. And with it, the business that effectively has become Yodel. So just a little bit on the history of Yodel. Yodel has its history really in the mail order catalogue businesses. The Littlewoods business had a distribution division called Business Express. The GUS business had a division that was originally White Arrow. It became Reality. And when those businesses came together in 2004, it became the Home Delivery Network. And that's how many people may have remembered it. It evolved into its current format of Yodel in 2010, really, when there was an acquisition of the DHL Express UK parcels business to bring Yodel into its current format. And as a business, since that point in 2010, Yodel has struggled in profitability terms. It actually hadn't made a profit during that period, despite the fact that it was operating in a generally growing market. The UK parcel industry has really been in growth since 2012, pretty consistently. So for me, joining Yodel, it had got the attraction of going back to work with a group of shareholders who I'd known for a long time, and who I liked working with. It had a special affinity. It was a bit like a football manager going back to his first team in some ways, but it was also a good intellectual challenge to try and work out why this big business, and there's some numbers on the screen now, I can see, over 400 million turnover, was struggling to make a profit in a growing market. Just to get your eye in on the numbers, because as the finance guy, I do like to have a few numbers on the screen. You can see that we've grown from in the full year of 2018, 400 million through to 430 million. So actually growing a bit below the market rate for the 3 years on the screen there. But what was the really horrible number was the profit number. We were down at, in the minus 43, 44, 45 million of EBITDA. And it hadn't always been as low as that, but it had consistently been a loss-making position really since Yodel had been formed. And I've done a few turnarounds, and Yodel had a number of characteristics that were fairly unique in this situation. I think where I've been involved in turnarounds before, it's typically been because the market has evolved and the company's been left behind and hadn't invested, or it's been because management had made some strange decisions, companies had dipped into a loss and there'd been a change, and I'd gone in and really I was addressing a 1-year loss situation and trying to put the company back into profits. This was a strange situation because it had been consistently unprofitable, and that was despite the fact that there'd been some really good people pass through Yodel. There'd been no expense spared in trying to recruit the very best people to try and help the turnaround. And from a shareholder perspective, there'd been a lot of support and a lot of investment, both in the infrastructure and the technology and the people. But for whatever reason, and that was the challenge for me, we were not profitable. So in 2019, I went in, took that challenge on, and I was really 5 or 6 months into the job when, of course, the pandemic started, and this week's quite a significant moment. Actually, it's a year tomorrow that we closed the Yodel head office and moved to home working. It's probably similar for a lot of people on the call, and then we had to adapt to all the challenges of home working. But of course, on the front line, we were nominated key workers. And so we had to keep 11,000 staff, which is the population of people working at Yodel, working every day through the pandemic, coping with all the challenges, and trying to make the business profitable at the same time.
Mike, thank you for that. You mentioned the pandemic there, and obviously a lot of people here will associate that pandemic with just simply having increased demand, and it must be easy to succeed with that kind of demand increasing during the pandemic. But what's your experience here? How customer expectation has during the pandemic has caused an accelerated change within your business as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt, Paul, in my mind, Yodel have been a net beneficiary of the pandemic. We've gained business as a result of it, and that's been helpful for the turnaround. Volume doesn't always equal profit, as a number of people I think have come out recently and said as they've declared their numbers. The pandemic for us had got a number of positives and some challenges. And I think, if you cast your mind back a year, those early days of March, there was quite a lot of unknowns. There was a lot of fear about exactly what the virus did and how you could catch it, and what it would mean as people were being sent home. And I think in those early days, we weren't really sure what was going to happen to volumes. We put salary sacrifice systems in place. Everyone was being paid less. And very quickly, we started to see the costs of the pandemic come through with the requirement for protective clothing and masks and so on. We had to put new processes in place to make sure that the customers felt safe in the delivery experience. And our priority really at that point was purely the safety of staff and customers. If I'm honest, we weren't too worried about the profitability. It was sort of pushed back slightly a little bit. We just wanted to keep the operation going and keep it going safely and get people used to the idea of, if you're an office worker working from home and if you're a frontline worker delivering, that you could be kept safe and keep going. As time went on, we saw some evolving trends in terms of the product categories people were ordering. Those early days where the weather was actually really good, we saw a lot of bulky parcels going through our network. Everybody seemed to want to order home gym equipment, home office equipment, a lot of sand pits, trampolines. I think with kids at home, people needed to keep them occupied, and our network was doing probably a similar number of parcels, but it was a very bulky parcel that we saw going through. Fashion saw a reduction, if I'm honest, at that point. But then as time evolved, we started to see volumes coming through in categories that Yodel are traditionally strong in. Things like food deliveries, flowers, pet food, wine, beers, sort of semi-premium categories. And subscription-based services have done really well through the pandemic, and that started to help us, and we saw a lift in volumes, and that was helpful, despite the fact that it was challenging operationally dealing with the absence. And we'd got as many as 1,000 people absent at any point in time. And of course, one of the challenges with this pandemic is that the absence can kick in very quickly, and you then have to react and manage the situation. For Yodel, we are a national carrier. We deliver to every postcode in the UK, and we've seen pockets of outbreaks of COVID around the country, and it's presented its own challenges. But overall, the volume has stayed consistently. I don't know what the real number is. I've heard anything between 3 and 5 years growth in e-commerce coming through within a year. Certainly volumes have lifted up. It feels like we've done 2 years work in one year as well at the same time, and it has been absolutely flat out for Yodel, and that's all contributed to an improvement in our performance. What I didn't dwell on the earlier slide, which showed our financials, is the likely outturn for this year, and I'm not going to talk about specific numbers, but what I can tell you is that the volumes have increased consistently by about a third. The turnover has lifted significantly as a consequence, and we will make a substantial profit. It's almost a mirror image of the losses, and the business is going from strength to strength. So it's actually quite difficult to predict where we will outturn this year, because every week we seem to be beating our targets. And so, whilst I went into Yodel with a challenge really of, can you tell us whether this is a business that will make a profit and devise a strategy, we're very fortunate that we're sitting here 18 months later and the business is already a successful turnaround.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned just before we started, Mike, from one of the questions from our younger attendees, that, I mean, you're delivering around 1 million parcels a day at the minute, which was up from about half of that this time last year. I mean, that's an enormous growth. I mean, what impact has that had on your people and culture at Yodel over the course of last year, would you say?
Well, I think in some ways the pandemic and the challenge of going from a loss to a profit is something that binds people together. We've certainly had a common cause. Across the board at Yodel, we adopted Boris's "Get Brexit Done" strategy to a "Get Profits Done" strategy, and it's really sort of pulled people together. Um, of course, like a lot of turnarounds, we've had to address the cost base, and we've had to um, say goodbye to a lot of people. It was a strange situation where in my first 6 months we lost a lot of people. It was there were people leaving before I arrived, and then when I arrived, there were a few more left. And overall, we were about 1,000 people down on perhaps 6 months before. And then the pandemic hit us, and the volumes came in, and we had to start to recruit people. But we recruited them in different areas, and the challenge has been recruiting frontline drivers, and we've had to be flexible and I think innovative about the way we've done that. We've used technology very well to train our drivers and get them up to speed very quickly. We've given them handheld terminals to help them get the parcels to customers quicker, and for customers to track those parcels. But things like working with taxi companies who saw a downturn in work through the pandemic. So we worked with Addison Lee in London, with Arrow Cars in the Midlands. And of course, taxi drivers, they know the roads. They're good drivers generally, and they've been a useful addition to our service. We've also had, really experienced people from other professions temporarily join Yodel as drivers. We've had a number of airline pilots, for instance, sign up with us because they were clearly looking for some work, and so our model is flexible, and taking people on has been a consistent theme. I think we took on about 3,000 people for peak. Of those that we took on, more than half of them are still with us.
That's great. I'd like now just to focus. I'd like to kind of shift towards looking at some of the challenges and opportunities. But just before we do that, I'd just like, as ever during these forums, we do our own research in this space. And I'd like to ask one of my colleagues, Theo. Theo, if you're able just to share your thoughts around what you see as the challenges and opportunities in this space, please.
Yeah, thank you, Paul, and good morning to everyone. So before the events of last year, the industry had already been in a state of disruption and uncertainty for a number of years. I think the factors driving this was the surge in e-commerce, but also changing customer expectations. Customers are expecting to receive shipments faster, with more flexibility and at a lower price. The disruption actually led to significant growth in this sector, and the market's expected to reach around $422 billion by 2024. Although the transformation of the industry had been well underway before the impacts of the pandemic had started to show, there can be no doubt that this has just accelerated the transformation, and some experts have been saying that the crisis has accelerated the development of online purchasing activity by nearly 3 years, and that when events return to normal, such changes will be permanent. Customers are going to continue to buy more online, and those who rarely bought online will make it a more common channel. However, to meet this transformation that the e-commerce surges have brought upon them, the businesses are being forced to keep up with developments that are not just year to year, but month to month, as online operators with new product offerings are looking at new modes of contracting and executing delivery. If we think of the delivery of fresh food during the pandemic as a case point, legacy postal operators don't ordinarily have the capabilities to manage cold chain, but are now having to adjust on the fly. A further challenge, which Mike alluded to, is the geographical impact that the e-commerce has had on distribution. Whereas in the past, it was big cities with dense populations driving this growth, the pandemic spread the e-commerce transformation more widely. And this forces delivery service businesses to rethink not just their capacity, but how to also build their infrastructure to meet this demand. It really leads to the question of how delivery service companies can adapt to meet the environment they now face. New technology must be considered and how it can transform its businesses to meet the demands of the landscape. Automation has significant potential to reinvent this industry, and solutions such as autonomous delivery vehicles and robots will become crucial enablers in the future in increasing efficiency and reaching customer expectations. And also, these businesses must consider digital transformation in their operations, processes, and solutions in order to remain relevant. They hold immense power in the vast amount of data they have or can gather. And with the assistance of data analytics, machine learning, cloud solutions, and a preparedness to work with their customers, these businesses are actually very well equipped to bring about the transformation required to meet evolving e-commerce demands and expectations.
Theo, thank you so much for that. There's a number of themes you touched on there, and maybe just picking up on the last one, the digital transformation side. Mike, there's a question coming through on the chat around what advice would you give to small retail businesses to get online, utilizing similar technologies that you've optimized on? I'll just touch on that briefly before we look at some of the broader challenges.
Well, yeah, I mean, just picking up on Theo's point there about the digital journey, I think that there's been a shift in the type of products being delivered. People are not ordering a pair of trainers that maybe they can wait 48 hours for. They're actually ordering food, or maybe food for their pet, and they've run out, and it's really important they get it. And what we've seen is an increase in the tracking requirements. Customers really want to know where their parcels are all the time, and with a number of people being home based and perhaps even furloughed, there's a genuine interest in following the parcel. So I think that digital journey of the parcel and how customers are kept up to speed is really important now for the consumer. I think also, one of the other points, Theo, you mentioned there was the geography. I think that's been a real challenge for us as a carrier. I know when Wales went into lockdown before England, and there were different rules in Wales, and then Glasgow, actually the Glasgow area was locked down, but not the whole of Scotland. We saw real spikes in the fall to ground of parcels that presented challenges in those locations for us, because the volumes were substantially more than the normal or the expected fall to ground. So there are a few themes that you mentioned there that I can absolutely relate to.
Thank you. Right. You mentioned some of the challenges as well. That increase in demand that you've seen is no guarantee of financial success. In the last week or so, we've seen companies that have seen demand or increase in demand, like Just Eat, Morrison's, and others, still be posting annual losses. What have been some of those, aside from the geography point you mentioned, what have been some of those key challenges in evolving Yodel?
Yeah. I think for us, capacity has been a challenge really for the last 12 months. And what we've had to do is to try and cleanse our network and try and make the parcels going through the network as suitable as possible for the automated systems that we've got. One of the things I discovered when I got to Yodel was that we were carrying all sorts of parcels, all shapes and sizes and weights, and not necessarily charging the appropriate price for that. And what that did was it was adding cost to the business, but importantly, it was slowing down the operation. So in the early days, we did have to have a conversation with some customers about either paying the right price for the traffic that they were putting through our network, or actually finding somebody else to carry those parcels. So we did part company with a few companies. In the early days, of course, we didn't know about the pandemic, but with the benefit of hindsight, that's been a real turning point for us, because it's allowed us to carry more of the more appropriate size parcels that allow us to get more through the network on a daily basis. Networks are designed for a particular shape and size of parcel. The more of that shape and size you can put through, the more efficient you can be, and the more effectively you can be at dealing with those spikes. I mentioned also the recruitment that we've done in the final mile. As a business historically, Yodel have had a large number of employed drivers. We've certainly increased the number of self-employed drivers that we've had working with us, a lot of temporary workers. But typically the training period was too long to get up to speed. We've used technology to give people a device in their hand that can guide them much more to shorten the training period, but make them much more effective at delivering parcels. And I think one of the things that I think we've done perhaps more than any other carrier is we put a real emphasis on training those drivers, and we've had a doorstep experience training program. When I joined Yodel, a lot of people were making jokes about, Yodel are the drivers that throw the parcel over the fence. I think if I joined Hermes or UPS or DHL, they'd have said the same thing, because a lot of carriers get that attachment. We've made a real effort with our drivers to make sure that they understand the importance of the quality of the experience when they're handing the parcel over, and how the parcel looks, and that they are on time, and that a smile makes all the difference. I think we've put customer service really at the heart of our turnaround, and we've measured that. We measure it through a number of sources. We've got our own internal sources where we do a regular survey. We have about 100,000 people a week take part in our survey, and they're people, real people who've had real Yodel parcel experiences. So I put a lot of faith in that survey, and the benefit of it is the data is very rich. And if a particular customer says they've had a bad experience, we can go back to that parcel and that driver, and we can understand what's gone wrong, and put the appropriate training in place. Of course, we also use Trustpilot as a benchmark. Oh, perfect. Our Trustpilot rating has consistently moved up. We are doing some things that are correct here, I think. Communication's been absolutely vital. We've made ourselves available. A number of parcel companies, I think, have chosen not to take part in monitoring social media. We do. We have a team that are actively looking at Twitter. We do respond to people on LinkedIn. If they contact Yodel with an issue, people do contact me. I'd like to think that we respond really quickly and we take those seriously. I think social media increasingly is going to play a role in people's perception of carriers, and Yodel's not always had the best perception. You go back 4 or 5 years, and there were various PR disasters around the brand that we have been trying to recover from. And I think the way to do that is to put the customer service at the heart of your program of work.
Absolutely. No, I mean that evolution in customer service and customer feedback, I know has been just part of that turnaround in Yodel. I mean, as you've been looking at evolving the business, what are the other pillars that you've focused on to involve embedding change and adapting to what is a very new marketplace for you?
Yeah, I think what we do at our heart is relatively simple. We try and make it sound simple. If you're a retailer and you're contracting with a carrier company, you think it's a relatively straightforward thing. You're giving them a parcel and you want them to take it to the end consumer. And we said the first thing we've got to do is be really good at delivering parcels. It's a very simple thing. If you're not really good at delivering parcels, people won't come to you. And the way to measure that is through the customer feedback, and Trustpilot has become our go-to guide, as well as our own internal surveys. So that's been really important. The other thing that I have tried to contribute as somebody who's run a retail business is that the peak period for a retailer is absolutely sacrosanct. That 6-week period around Black Friday, the run up to Christmas, there's a lot of profits made. It's a very stressful period. The volumes can double. In some cases, if you're a toy retailer, they can be 10 times your normal week. And I think at Yodel, we've been really good over the last 2 peaks at delivering fantastic service for our clients. There's always a temptation to take on more business outside of peak, but then fail in the peak period. And, with that retail background, I've been really keen that we don't do that. So peak has been sacrosanct. So I think the people that have worked with Yodel would hopefully agree that we've had 2 really good peaks now in terms of customer service, whilst at the same time growing and dealing with the issues of the pandemic and so on and so forth. I think another pillar that we've put in place is to be really challenging on the cost base. When I arrived, after 10 years of losses, you would think that we were the leanest, cleanest cost base in the business, but there's always something extra that you can do. And I've said to our team, remember, we're a sizable business. We're turning over now, significantly in excess of £500 million. Our business is worth something to the people that supply us, and so we have to negotiate hard. And we've done that, and very often stayed with the same suppliers, but we've reduced our cost base. I think the final pillar I'd mention, Paul, is really about people. Because what's been interesting for me about this turnaround is I haven't recruited a single person myself. You know, a layer of management and around 1,000 people left Yodel 18 months or so ago, and what we've encouraged is for that top team to get down in the detail and get their hands dirty, and for the layer of people that were below the layer that left to really act up and own what's going on in their functions. And it's been an incredible response, really. It's been a very powerful thing to see. If I look at the operations team, because essentially we're an operational business, we've got over 200 years experience in the top 5 or 6 people. There isn't anything they've seen in parcel delivery that they've not seen before. And so when things happen, and things do go wrong, as they do in every business, I'm really confident that we've got a team of top people now who get their hands dirty. They're into the detail. They've seen it before. They know how to deal with it. And problems get fixed really quickly. I think that hasn't always been the case. We've had people from outside of industries come to Yodel, people who are a bit more strategic and less hands-on, and it hasn't worked. What we now have is a very hands-on board operating down, and we've got a management layer who, again, are very experienced. We've got a lot of long-serving staff at Yodel, but rather than them feeling as if they were having change done to them, they're owning it and driving it within their own functions, and people feel very empowered. And for me, I've not seen that before in another business that I can think of. But we've strangely, on a forum of people involved in search and selection and recruitment, we've not been big recruiters of management in the marketplace. We've taken the experience that we've got. We've taken a couple of people from sister companies, which has been helpful, and they've come together as a team of people, very low ego, very hands-on, with that common cause of moving into profitability. I think the challenge for me now will be profitability's almost come a lot quicker than we thought. I remember one of the measures that we look at is last 12 months trading, and I joined in September 19. In September 20, on a LTM basis, we'd got to profit, which had been, for me, the turnaround. Everything since then has been about building the business on the other side of the profits. But a lot of it's been down to just empowering people, and I guess that's risky because when you're new in a business, you don't know all those people. But it's certainly worked for us at Yodel.
Absolutely, Mike. And I'd just like to thank at this point Moravia, who's one of our attendees here. I think Moravia, you just put a fantastic summary up on the screen there, because Moravia is highlighting that although we're not all, well, probably you're one of the few people actually on this forum that's involved in parcel delivery. Actually, the lessons and the points that you're making, Mike, I think are very relevant to all businesses. That the point around pricing, not one size fits all, adapting around those core principles, the sense of purpose you speak about. So thank you very much for that, Moravia. That's fantastic. I do note ESG questions, and I will come to those shortly. But I'd just like to hand over to my colleague Peter now. And Peter, because I know that you want to talk, I think, a little bit more about kind of adapting for the future and where things are heading.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and thank you, Mike, so far. Obviously, I mean, you've been talking already about the degree of change that your business has accelerated through during this exciting period, and you've talked about both the extent of change in the e-commerce industry, that 3 to 5 years acceleration that you and Theo have both referenced, and you've also talked to them about the 2 years worth of work in 1 year that you've been through. I just wonder, looking forward though for Yodel, how is the pace of change going to look, and what other marketplace and business challenges are you planning for as you look forward now?
Yeah, I think there are a number of challenges for logistics companies, but there's also a number of challenges for retailers, I guess, and we should touch on that because, just reinforcing the point that it's not all been good in the pandemic. Some retailers have gone into administration. Arcadia were a client of mine. quite a big client. So, whilst we've grown in some areas, we've fallen back in other areas where we've lost volumes and so on. And I think it's interesting to see how retailers now respond to the growth of e-commerce and what will happen when stores are allowed to open again. We've seen a couple of interesting trends. Certainly, that there are a few retailers now starting to use their stores in this down period as sort of mini warehouses. We see an increasing requirement for people, for retailers asking us to pick up from store rather than from centralized warehouses. I guess that makes sense if you've got stock in those locations and you're paying for them and you've got staff in them, rather than pulling the stock back into a centralized warehouse. They're using them as fulfillment locations. And I suppose depending on your commitments to the lease for that building, that may be something that we see a little bit more of going forward. It's quite an interesting trend, I think. What else are we seeing? I think, Sunday deliveries perhaps is another thing. At Yodel, we're not doing Sunday deliveries, but it's certainly something that we're starting to look hard at. I think the Royal Mail have announced recently they're going to test Sunday deliveries with a limited number of retailers. I think it gives the opportunity to put more capacity in the market in the short term. Certainly for categories like food, I think it's a genuine requirement for incremental business. I think some categories it's not incremental; it's just spreading things. But I think that will definitely be something that's be quite powerful. I think another thing I can see is the use of pick up and drop off deliveries. At Yodel, we have a partnership that we were founding partners in with Collect Plus. It's 6,500 stores across the UK. It was certainly a growing business before the pandemic, because some stores closed and because there's been less travel. It's not grown really in the last 12 months, but I think the convenience of pick up and delivery and drop off locations is a really important thing that will continue. I think it also plays a little bit towards a green agenda if it means that you've got less vans travelling down the same road delivering to the same addresses. People can either walk and pick up their parcels, or they can call in at those PUDO locations as part of another journey. So I think there's lots of good reasons why PUDO locations work. I think the other thing I've seen in the last 12 months is this concept of multi-carrier strategies. Not that long ago, people used to pile all their volume together and go and negotiate the lowest price for a big volume number. I think increasingly some of the very large retailers now acknowledge that you really do need to share your volume perhaps over 2, 3, or even 4 carriers, because the volumes are too big for one person or it's too risky. And boards of retailers will be looking at that, I think, going forward. And once you open that door to a multi-carrier strategy, you start to do comparisons, I think, and you compare the performance of, how does one company compare to another, and what does the customer think of this company versus that company. And so for me, that's why putting customer service and Trustpilot ratings and social media at the heart of what we've done at Yodel will be really important going forward, because it's not really there yet, but I don't think we're far away where people start choosing in their retail checkout basket who their carrier is. Certain big retailers will be able to do that before too long if they want to. And to be honest, some carriers are stronger in certain geographies than others. But at Yodel, we're making a big effort to be strong across the country and to make sure that our good performance is recognised.
Thanks, Mike. Just picking up on that customer service and Trustpilot point that you've made a couple of times now, clearly extremely important. I just wonder, as far as your people are concerned, how different does the future look for your people? Maybe what does it mean for your culture and then continuing to develop your people in the way that you've been describing so far? What does the future look like for that?
Well, I mentioned earlier the training that we'd done on the doorstep. We had a really positive reaction from customers, but also from staff. There'd not been a lot of training done across the business. And I think you can understand that when you look at the history of the profits and say, 10 years of losses, quite often it's discretionary money that gets cut first, and is training a discretionary thing. It was quite a bold decision in the early days to set aside what's been around £1 million worth of investment in people on the front line. But I think we're going to see more of that. I think we're also starting to see more use of technology, which is helpful in guiding people through our processes. Certainly we're finding that when you train somebody, that they'd much rather watch a video than read a book on how to do something. So it used to be when you joined Yodel, you'd get your manual of how to do the job. Increasingly now, whether it's in on-the-job training or health and safety or whatever, we're using videos to bring it to life.
Maybe just one last question on the future. What's your, I guess, what's the greatest risk you think you face, or fear, or what's the thing you fear in terms of disruption most that might challenge you and your business most?
Well, I guess I would summarize it by saying that we've grown into profitability. Previously we were trying to shrink into profitability. In the last 12 months, we've grown into it. So any threat to growth, I think, would be a challenge. I think when you look at what could happen, it's really difficult to predict as we come out of a lockdown whether everything reverses. I genuinely don't think it will. I don't really hear anybody saying that, but it might. Another impact for me might be the influence of the government. There's been talk now for perhaps 12 months around a tax on e-commerce companies.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that slows down the growth of e-commerce, I don't know, but potentially it could. So my fear really is around constraints on growth, I would say.
Thank you, Mike. I know there's been a bunch of questions around the ESG agenda as well. I'm going to hand back to Paul, who's going to table a couple of those, I think. Thank you.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Peter. Yes, Mike, there's been, as we're talking about the future, there's obviously an opportunity for you to differentiate what you take to the marketplace, alongside the other delivery and courier companies. Can you just take us through your thinking on ESG? Because there's a number of people have highlighted here, there's an increasing government agenda around carbon footprint. To what extent are you looking at that within Yodel, and how important is that in terms of your 2022-23 strategy in terms of differentiating yourself in the market?
Yeah, it's a really important subject, and we talk about it a lot. But what I would say is there's almost been a little bit of a pause in the last 12 months because there's been a lot less traffic on the roads, and many of the cities that were introducing the low emission zones paused their programs. So I think that there has been a sort of treading water really across the whole country on the low emission zone thing. When I got to Yodel, my priority wasn't necessarily buying a lot of electric vehicles. I had an absolute priority of take away a loss of £45 million that's consistently there and try and get us into profit. And if I'm brutally honest, my agenda was really to look at reducing the carbon footprint once we'd got into profitability. However, there's been certain things that have been very obvious to do as we've been going along. Our strategy hasn't really been about buying electric vehicles and shifting from one diesel source to a different energy source. What we've been trying to do is actually to reduce the use of energy wherever we can. There's a number of ways I think we do that. One way has been by promoting our PUDO network, because we genuinely think there's less mileage involved in delivering and picking up a parcel at a PUDO site versus going to home. Another thing that we've done is we've developed a much more advanced handheld terminal that actually can be an app on a driver's own digital device to allow them to plan their tours more efficiently, more effectively, to use less fuel and to use less mileage in their delivery rounds. And that's had a huge benefit. We've also installed technology in all of our trucks so that we are able to monitor the driving standards and the type of driving that is being experienced. We're looking to reduce the overall mileage that Yodel vehicles are travelling. And that's clearly a good thing, even though it may not be that we're switching the energy source. In terms of the fleet, we have, I think, one of the most modern fleets of all of the carriers. All our vehicles are Euro 6 compliant. To be fair to the previous people at Yodel and the current shareholders, there's been no lack of investment in buying new vehicles. So whilst they are diesel vehicles in the main, they are low emission diesel modern vehicles. So I mean, we're playing around the edges here, really. We're not making a statement and saying we bought 100 electric vans, but we're doing what we can without that major capital investment, whilst we try and get the business into a profit. And the next stage will be to start to look at alternative fuels. And actually, even in the last 2 weeks, we have been looking at gas-powered vehicles, and we're starting to make some decisions to buy different alternative fuel types.
Thank you, Mike. And I think just picking up on another question we see in the chat there, just around those innovations that may impact that ESG strategy. We hear news of drones, driverless vehicles, things like that. I mean, are there other things in, I guess, the wings that you're considering as you plan what that ESG strategy might look like in future years?
Yeah, I mean, for me, drones and driverless vehicles are not on our agenda. It still feels some way off. I think even the alternative fuel sources have still got some way to go to be as efficient. And there are all sorts of practicalities about charging points that are still there. That I think the idea of driverless vehicles and drones must be 5 years away. And therefore, for me at the moment, in the evolution of Yodel, it's not been an immediate priority. It's probably something we'll start to think about as we develop our 3-year plan now and go forward. But I'm not going to wave a flag and say that this has been top of our agenda. It's not been something that we've devoted lots of time to at the moment. I do think lockers will be interesting though as an alternative development. It's not something that we've played an active role in, but I can see other people getting some success with lockers, and I think in their own way, lockers can be a bit like the Pudo network. It's a way of reducing mileage.
Okay, no, thank you, Mike. No, I appreciate the candor on that. Peter, just coming back to you, do you want to just dig a little bit more maybe into that future readiness and what that workforce of the future might be looking like?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Mike. You've just referred to a 3-year plan there. How different do you think it's going to look from what it looked like before the pandemic? I mean, how significant has your mind shifted in terms of that planning, and what that future might hold for you and your people in particular?
Well, I mean, for the company, I think it's a really successful future now. I mean, logistics is a key service. I think it's one of the industries. I mean, I'm not really just talking about Yodel. I think a number of competitors have also performed really well, and they've become very valuable. They play an important role. They've become very valuable because they've become very profitable in financial terms. And I believe that the growth will continue. So, what we're doing is prudently looking at how we can increase our capacity. We've tried to increase capacity through people and efficiency. The next stage will be through capital investment. So it'll be through buying machinery and sites. We're not unique in that. Everyone will be looking at the same thing. Unfortunately, the cost of logistics Real estate is going up all the time because everybody's trying to do the same thing. But it's a different challenge for me. I mean, we moved from being a turnaround business to a growth business, and having to cope with managing capital projects, which has not been really a feature of the last few months. In terms of the people, I mean, what it showed to me is we've already got a fantastic group of people at Yodel that have really pulled together over the last 12 months. I think we shouldn't underestimate how difficult it's been for people at work, particularly on the front line. It's everyone knows somebody that's had a bad experience through COVID. That affects your work. I think when you've got 11,000 staff, it's like a mini town. In essence, we see everything at Yodel. And one of the things that we've done this year and made a conscious decision to put a lot of time and money into is really a mental health initiative for all of our staff. So we're in the process of recruiting within our own teams about 100 mental health first aiders, so that we've got people around the business who are trained to recognise the symptoms of mental health, because it's not lost on me that not many of our people have had a holiday for a year, and having a holiday at home is not quite the same. But certainly on the front line, they've been flat out, interacting with the public, more deliveries per tour than ever, in all sorts of weather, and we absolutely need to put our people at the front of what we're thinking about for the next 12 months. To do that, we work with Retail Trust, who've got a number of mental health initiatives that are very, very valuable and powerful, and they've been a big supporter to us as we've developed our own mental health programme.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we all identify very strongly with that recognition of this strange world that we currently live in and operate in, and what it does mean for us all from many perspectives, including from a mental health perspective, as you've pointed out there. Very, very true indeed. Just one thought on your expectations for volumes going forward in the immediate future, I suppose. What are your expectations, and do you think the levels of e-commerce will stay in the near future, or will people return to the high street more, and do you expect a drop in some form?
Purely personal, I don't see a drop coming at all. I think the last 12 months has been too long a period now for people to go back to their previous behaviours. I think if you do something for 15, 20 times, it becomes a way of operating, and people now are used to ordering through e-commerce channels, and they've seen the benefits of it as well. I mean, it's not just you have to do it. Actually, there's lots of good things from doing it that way, and I don't really see how people are going to go back to the old ways. So I'm very confident that volumes will continue. Predicting that level is really difficult, and I think what will happen is very quickly logistics companies will start to max out on their capacity. Hopefully, we can all spend our capital investments and increase the capacity before that happens, because nobody likes turning business away. But certainly, all of my plans really are for growth from here. I don't see us going back. But I may be wrong. This is never happened before, has it? We're all guessing.
No, it's interesting. I mean, in some ways, Mike, particularly when you're highlighting the food deliveries and things like that, you're moving towards almost that social service element of of needing to people relying on you to an extent maybe they haven't been before. It's not just for the odd gift or delivery here and there. It's so much more. And I guess just again reflecting some of the questions we see coming through, how are you going to manage that? Because do you see going forward that actually you'll become more picky around the types of things you deliver, where you deliver them to, because as that capacity increases, taking, I think as someone said here, a gearbox up to a northern Scotland Isle is not going to be a profitable enterprise for you. So do you see yourself needing to pivot towards core deliveries into core locations, or maybe more fulfilling that social service?
I think I see us doing lesser of the large, awkward deliveries that on occasions come with a premium price, but absolutely slow down the network. And I think, we know what our strengths are. We know what we're good at. We know what our automated kit is good at. And I think one of the good things we've done in recent times is trying to shape the volume coming into Yodel to be absolutely suitable for the way the network is built. In the past, I'm not sure that the cross-functional work in between the different teams has been strong enough that they knew exactly what they wanted. And maybe Yodel's bought volume in the past and found actually once they'd got it, it was actually more difficult than they thought it was going to be, and therefore it wasn't profitable. We have we almost have a board meeting every day. I mean, across our board, we are talking every day. This isn't a business that meets once a week or once a month. So we're very tight between the operation and the commercial teams. And in terms of bringing business in, it needs to work within the operation and keep the efficiency. And that's something that we're very focused on going forward. That having been said, we are looking at buying new pieces of kit that will stretch us and extend us both in our capacity and our type of products. I think, Paul, going back to the question on volume, the other point I would make is I'm on the board of a digital marketplace business called Frugo, and we're seeing huge growth in cross-border traffic. This isn't slowed down at all, really, by Brexit. People are still ordering cross-border all the time, and we're seeing huge growth. And I think certainly we're seeing fantastic growth in what I would call direct to consumer from overseas markets, and China is the call out one. Many Chinese manufacturers now are dealing directly with British consumers, and there's huge volumes now coming in from overseas. We're working probably with 4 or 5 different locations where there are D2C operations in place, taking out that supply chain of distributors and wholesalers and seeing manufacturers going straight to consumers and looking for a distribution partner to deliver in the UK. So you layer that on top of the normal UK volumes and the pandemic effect. I think we're in a very buoyant period for quite a long time.
That's good to hear, and that's very encouraging to hear, because that underpins a lot of activity in the wider economy as well. So last question, Mike, pending any shout outs or anything else from the floor, what's the ambition then? People here have commented the need of a 3-year, 5-year plan, the importance of that. What's the big, bold ambition? What are you going to do to disrupt the industry?
I think it's more of the same for us. I don't think there's one standout thing I'm going to sort of publicly say this is what we're going to do. We've got a period now of consolidation. We've got into profits incredibly quickly. We want to consolidate that profit. We want to keep growing. I'm a target-driven person. I can see Yodel getting to £1 billion of sales, within a sensible period. I think growth will keep coming. And I think if we can maintain our profitability at the same rates that we are now, profit to sales ratios and so on, and keep that customer service position at the heart of everything we do, we'll carry on being successful. So I think continued success, and it'll be a genuine reward for the shareholders who've stuck with the business for a long time through thick and thin, really.
No, Mike, that's great to hear. And once again, thank you for that. We've covered a huge amount of ground, and the summaries have been done better than I can already in some of the chat here. But yeah, we've covered a huge amount, and I think what I'd like to flag is that some of the themes you've touched on, the sense of purpose, the value, people believing in it, the empowerment of your people, as well as that agenda, as well as so many of those agenda items, are going to be themes that we'll focus on again and again. Next week, as promised, we'll be focusing, again on the future of business, focusing on all those themes around workforce innovation and other topics as we debate exactly what the future of the office and the future of the workforce looks like. And we'll be led next week by someone who's been on this forum before, Dan Foley from Kier Construction, but also Soren Vestergaard from ISS. So that proves, I think that'll be a fascinating session to wrap up this series. But look, Mike, thank you once again. We've run out of time. I'd really like to thank you for all the insights you've shared and speaking so candidly about Yodel. It's been fascinating. I do apologise if I didn't get to your question, but hopefully I think we managed to get the essence of all the questions that came through. There will be a video of today's session posted on our website, so please access that and share with your friends, colleagues, and LinkedIn contacts. So until next week, Mike, thank you very much once again. And on behalf of my Protiviti and Robert Half team here, I'd like to thank everyone for attending and extend our best wishes to you all. Stay safe, be kind to each other, and we look forward to seeing you all again next week. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.